I'm looking forward to working with you. It was Rena, a junior, who said this to me in a tone of voice, drawing out the end of words which I really hate. I was unlucky enough to become her trainer. My name is Jake. I am a 28-year-old company employee. Since I joined the company as a new graduate, I have been one of the top sales performers. This is all because my colleagues who are older than me taught me the ropes of sales. I wanted to be just like him. So when the section chief asked me to be in charge of training the new hires, I was honestly pleased. The colleague who had taught me had been promoted and moved to a different department. There might not have been anyone else suitable for the job other than me. That's what I thought at the time. But now that I think about it, the attitude of the section chief who approached me was also somewhat strange. I found out the reason for his strange attitude the day before a new mid-career hire was scheduled to arrive. The section chief said, "Actually," and I was surprised to hear what he'd say after that. To my surprise, he told me that the new mid-career hire was the daughter of our executive director. So he reminded me to be careful how I treated her. I was scared, but the section chief said something appropriate like, "Well, I'm sure you'll be fine." So in conclusion, he was giving me jobs that was a hassle for everyone. I didn't really know the executive director that well, but I had heard many rumors about him. He seems to be a good, diligent worker, but I heard that he acts very strictly to his subordinates that are close to harassing them. However, recently there are some employees who claim that even a little bit of harshness becomes a harassment, so I don't really know what's going on. Anyway, I decided that no matter who the person is, I must instruct him or her appropriately. Then the new employee arrived. Her name is Rena. She is 25 years old, 3 years younger than me. The section chief is trying his best to flatter her. I felt uncomfortable, but I treated her as a newbie. She began to say this, "I'm Rena. Nice to meet you," in a very shallow tone, which was not appropriate for the workplace. I also greeted her. Rena looked at me with a scrutinizing look. You don't look like you can do your job. Are you okay?" I was annoyed by her words, but managed to hold back. "I have the top sales record, though." Rena laughed at me as if I was an idiot. "Oh, someone like you? Really? Well, I don't really care. By the way, you know who my father is, right?" I can't believe she would say such a thing to me. But Rena continues. "My dad said that it's not good to be unemployed forever, so I had no choice but to come here. He said I'm beautiful, so I'm suited for sales." I continued to be astonished at the words coming out of Rena's mouth. "My dad told me that I can get a contract easily if I smile and laugh next to you, so you don't really have to teach me the difficult stuff." Her attitude left me speechless. Rena's face was perfectly normal. Is she a very confident person? Well, she may be suited for sales in a way, but it's not an easy world where she can make sales just by smiling. I don't mean to be rude to people who join the company due to network, but she doesn't really have to show it off that much like that. I had a headache from day one, but I did what I had to do. I stayed with her for a few days and taught her how to do her job, but Rena immediately said, "What? I don't understand." When I pointed out her mistakes, she was clearly vexed, and it was extremely difficult to work with her. Even so, I need her to be as effective as possible. I asked Rena to write a very simple order form and went to the customer's office. What I asked Rena to write was the order from yesterday's customer. I knew there was no way she could make a mistake, but I reminded her that I would check it when I got back. When I came back from the client's office, Rena was nowhere to be found. When I asked the chief about it, he looked at his watch and said, "Well, she left to go to lunch. That must have been an hour and a half ago." The section chief blurts that out. "But shows no signs of trying to contact her. I sigh at this difference in response, even though he is furious when we are even slightly late to come back from our break. So I say, I asked her to prepare the order form yesterday, and to that, the chief tells me that she had already submitted the order form. Rena complained to the section chief that she couldn't even go for a break because I hadn't come back. He said that the section chief allowed her to go on break because she submitted the form instead. So you're saying that you confirmed the form and the details of it, right? I asked him just to be sure, but he shook his head. There's no way she could have made a mistake on an order form like that. He laughed and walked away from me. I was a little uneasy, but I figured that if the section chief says so, there was no point in digging any further, so I got on with other work. The next day, however, I was summoned by the section chief. What the heck is this? I wondered what he was talking about, and he tells me that the order form I had asked Rena yesterday was completely wrong. The chief glances at the manager next to him. It's like the section chief is trying to put the blame on me in front of the manager, so the manager wouldn't get mad at him. I told not only the section chief, but also the general manager that it was me who asked Rena to take care of it, and that I would check on it when I got back from the client's office. And I explained that the section chief had taken care of it and submitted it to the client. The section chief raised his voice and said, You, the trainer, are responsible for the new employee's mistake. But the manager asks me, Is that true? Of course, I was not lying. When I called Rena to the spot and explained the situation to her, she said, Are you saying it's my fault? I can't believe it. And suddenly she became angry. That's not what I mean. I want you to explain the situation, what happened yesterday. I say that, but Rena doesn't listen. He pushed me to do work and was gone, so isn't it your responsibility? Rena says so, and the section chief gets into the conversation. You need to take a little more responsibility if you're her trainer. I was angry at the way they said it, but I kept my mouth shut because it would only make things worse. The manager couldn't stand to see what was going on, so he said that he would talk to me individually. That's when Rena tells me, You're the worst. I'm going to tell my dad about this. The manager doesn't really know if I'm lying or not, but he can't see the facts, so he said that he was going to put this case on hold. He told me to put all my energy into other matters, and I nodded. The next day, what awaited me was an unbelievable situation. As soon as I arrived at work, the chief approached me. The executive director is asking for you. What? I asked back, but the section chief angrily told me to go quickly because the executive director was asking for me. The executive director is Rena's father, right? Is it about what happened yesterday? I looked around but couldn't find Rena. I had no choice but to hurry to the executive director's place. I had never had a chance to talk to him before, and I was secretly scared. But it would be wrong to say that it was all my fault. I tried to act calmly and went to where the executive director was, and saw Rena there. Rena notices me and grins. I called out to the executive director. Then the executive director suddenly yells at me. You're Rena's trainer. I back away from him. I heard you blamed Rena for your own mistake. You're so arrogant. Did you know that she's my daughter? I knew that Rena didn't tell her father what happened properly. I tried to excuse myself, but there was no chance for me to even say what I wanted to say. The executive director kept saying, We don't need you at this company. You're fired right this instant. Rena, who was right behind the executive director, was laughing. I was so mad that I began to say, With all due respect, sir, But the executive director interrupted me. Shut up! You're fired. You're not worthy of an excuse. Pack up your stuff and go home right now. It seems that the rumors of the executive director's harassment were true. There was no way I could allow myself to be treated unfairly like that. I managed to suppress my anger. But if I open my mouth now, only my emotions will come out. I suppressed it, said I understood, and left the place. Then the section chief says, "What? You're fired?" as he was laughing away, and I got even more irritated. But what good would it do to take my anger out on the section chief? I glared at the section chief and started packing up my stuff. The manager stops me, but I tell him, "I don't think this company needs me, so I'll go to a different place where they'll need me." And hearing that, the manager looked at me as if he didn't have a choice and agreed to take care of the rest. I went back to my house where I was living alone. Fortunately, I had enough money in savings to get by for a while. Even though I tried to depend on alcohol, my mood and emotions did not calm down much. Then I happened to see a travel program on the TV. All right, maybe I should just go on a trip. So like that, I decided to go on a spontaneous trip. Come to think of it, Grandpa is traveling abroad again, huh? I went to bed that day, thinking of my grandfather, whom I had not seen for a while. The next morning, I set out on my trip. It was a carefree solo trip. I had been working so much that I felt like I was able to reset my nerves after spending a few days in a foreign country. Then my phone rang, and when I answered it, it was Rena. It had been a few days since then, so I don't know why Rena was calling me just now. When I worked for the company, I was often out of the office for sales work, and I had given her my personal number in case something happened. She didn't even call me the other day, so what's this all about? At any rate, when I answer, I heard Rena's panicking voice. "Are you the CEO's grandson, Jake?" What the? I raised my eyebrows at the sudden phone call. Rena seems to be calling from her office and starts talking on her own about an incident that happened earlier. Today's the day the CEO returns from his overseas business trip. The executive director knew this and was about to introduce his daughter Rena to him. Then the CEO showed up at the sales department where Rena was. The executive director rushed to the CEO at once and introduced Rena to him. Rena said in her usual tone, "Pleased to meet you." And the CEO replied back, "Nice to meet you," in his usual tone. Then the CEO would say, "Where is my grandson?" The executive director looked at the CEO, not knowing what he was talking about. "Excuse me?" Then the CEO said, "My grandson, Jake. I haven't seen him for a while, so I thought I'd check in on him once in a while. Ah, maybe he's already left to see his clients?" As he looked around the office. Then the executive director, realizing it was me, got completely pale and said, "Yes, I guess so, sir." And he seemed to have went along with the CEO's conversation. Yes, my grandfather is the CEO of the company. But I didn't want people to think that I joined the company because of my grandfather, and I wanted to be evaluated fairly. I had talked to a senior colleague who had helped me before about who I am, but he said, "If you want to test your ability, it might be better to keep quiet." And since then, I have never told people about it, partly because I was told to keep it to myself. We have the same last name, but it's a common last name, so I've never been noticed. It's rare for my grandfather to show up in the sales department like he did this time. "That's why you should come back now," Rena says to me in a trembling voice. "It was your father who said I was fired, remember? He didn't even listen to my side of the story, and I can't just disobey the executive director's order, could you?" "But if I don't do anything about this, my dad will be fired. Please, come to the office as soon as possible." Rena's voice was so loud that I involuntarily pulled my phone away from my ear. "Oh, I can't. I've been fired. And Grandpa wouldn't fire your dad unfairly like that. Tell the executive director to talk to the CEO about the justifiable reason for firing me." Well, if there is such a justifiable reason, though. I said so bluntly and hung up the phone. After that, Rena continued to call me, so I got annoyed and blocked the calls. That night, Grandpa called me and I told him everything. Grandpa was surprised to hear that I had been fired, but then he laughed and said,
So, Jake is unemployed now, huh?
I felt guilty because I had worked so hard so that I could be useful to Grandpa. But Grandpa is planning to start up a group company soon, and he wants me to go there.
It's a small company, but I wanted to leave it to you, Jake.
Grandpa took the trouble to show up at the sales department, apparently to talk about this. A few days later, I was called by the CEO to the company. Then Rena saw me and ran up to me. For some reason, the executive director was there too.
Jake, you're back. Well then, now Daddy will...
She starts to say something like that, but I cut her off. I didn't come back to the company to work here because I was fired by the executive director. I was just summoned by the CEO today. I stare at the executive director as I say this. The executive director changes color and averts his gaze. Rena shrugs.
Please don't say that. They say that the sales department's performance dropped because you're gone. And to take responsibility for that, my dad is coming to the sales department next month. How is it possible for you to go from executive director to regular employee? It's all because you're the CEO's grandson, right?
I was getting irritated at the way she said that.
I didn't quit. I was fired, you know. You heard it too, didn't you? And you were laughing while that happened. Unlike you, I didn't join the company because I used my grandpa's network. It's not like I'm getting special treatment because I'm the CEO's grandson. Besides, you said that if you keep smiling, you can get a contract with a client right away, didn't you? Then why don't you do that?
I tell her sarcastically, and she gets angry.
I did go to the client's office. I went with someone else to do the sales work, but people talk behind my back saying how clumsy and careless and goofy I am.
I laugh at her words.
Does that mean you didn't close a single deal?
Rena nodded.
Well, it's not a surprise.
I continue on while I laugh.
If the executive director is coming to the sales department, won't your performance improve? You'll be able to get contracts as fast as like how he fired me. Don't you think so? Well, it would be a huge problem if you caused any problems like you did before, though. Since the employee he fired is gone and the sales performance has dropped because of that, it's normal to take responsibility and get demoted. And the reason he got that position is because other employees complained that he was harassing them too. I think he's lucky that he didn't get fired at this point.
Yes, after I told Grandpa everything, he said he did an internal investigation. It's only been a few days, so he hasn't been able to find out any details, but seems that the executive director's harassment was being covered up. It was the executive director's staffs who had covered it up, and Grandpa took this opportunity to conduct structural reforms internally. The executive director's staffs were removed from the board, and the executive director was demoted to an ordinary employee. I remembered about something and called out to the section chief, who was watching the situation close by. Of course, if this department's performance declines, it will affect the section chief's bonus. Please do your best, I say with a smile, and to that, the chief says, I'm really sorry, as he apologizes, looking a little frightened. Even if you apologize, there's nothing I can do about it. Maybe the day will come when the chief will have to take responsibility. I laughed as I said that. No way! I'll do anything! I'll apologize! The chief got down on his knees with a pale face, but I just ignored him and said this. I've been put in charge of an affiliated company, so there's no need for you to apologize to me. Only the manager was happy that I was put in charge of an affiliated company. He was on my side from the beginning to the end, so I asked him, "Did you know that I was the grandson of the CEO?" But to that, he laughed and replied, "I had no idea. I just recognized you as a good employee." I was simply happy to hear him say that. After that, the ex-executive director moved to the sales department, but his sales performance was terrible. Rena went with her father to a difficult customer and the contract was cancelled. The ex-executive director was sued by another employee for his harassment, and he quit the company because he was unable to stay there. The sales department received some excellent people through headhunting, and Rena was told by them that she was not good at her job. so she quit. I imagine that Rena and her father are at their wits' end right now, their pride being shredded like that. The section chief has been demoted to a normal employee and his former subordinate has become his boss. When the ex-chief was unhappy about it and swore at him, people around him started laughing at him for being pathetic, and I heard that the ex-section chief eventually resigned because he couldn't bear to stay there too. And I contributed myself to the establishment of an affiliated company. And I am now happily working as the CEO of that company.